So good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. And this is Sarah Galt with the Kuskokwim Corporation. Today we are talking with our HR staff through DUMOC, one of our subsidiaries. And they're going to introduce themselves, but this is our TKC Lunch and Learn series that we are doing. Today we're going over resumes and cover letters. And I'm going to turn it over to Desiree and Rhonda. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Desiree Gill, and I'm the HR director with DUMOC, as Sarah mentioned, and we're here to do a presentation on interviews and resumes and cover letters. And I've been in the HR field for about 20 years, and as well as payroll. So hopefully we'll be able to answer questions and you get a lot of good information out of today's presentation. And I'll let Rhonda introduce herself.
Hello, I am Rhonda Diorio, and I am the recruiter here with DUMOC. I've been with the company for just over a year. It's been an interesting ride for me, but it's been great dealing with all the subsidiary companies. I've been in HR for about 20 years also, and I hope to be with the company for many more.
Very good. Well, thank you. And so again, some of you are joining us. This is our TKC Lunch and Learn series. And today we are going over resumes and cover letters. And I'm Sarah Galt. I'm the Director of Outreach and Foundations here at TKC. And I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly. If you want to go ahead and do your part.
Perfect. All right, and you guys can all see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Hello, and welcome to another HR presentation in the TKC Shareholder Lunch and Learn series. Today, we will be discussing the topic of resume and cover letter writing. Before we begin, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Kimberly Slifer, and I joined DUMOC and TKC as the Benefits Administrator in January of this year. Before this, I worked for a CDQ group that also served the residents of 20 communities in the Yukon-Kuskokwim region. I've been in HR almost 8 years and have held specialized roles in almost every aspect of human resources. In my spare time, I enjoy hunting, fishing, and ATVing. I also do a lot of volunteering. I volunteer with a bunch of different organizations, but I'm most heavily involved with the Iditarod's Return Dog Program and dog handling at the race starts. So now that you know a little bit more about me, let's get started. For today's agenda, we'll start off by discussing resume basics. We'll then move on to reviewing the layout and general sections of resumes. Following that, we'll discuss cover letters. During the presentation, please feel free to type any questions you may have into the chat box, and we'll go over them at the end during the Q&A discussion. With that, let's begin. So you might be asking yourself, why do I need a resume? Well, resumes allow you to show potential employers your skills and experience. Resumes allow you to highlight what makes you the best person for the job and why you stand out from all the other applicants. Rhonda, who is DUMOC's and TKC's recruiter, has a great quote to keep in mind as you write your resume. A resume will never get you a job. The goal of a resume is to get you an interview. All right, let's get started with resume basics. If you are creating your resume on a program like Microsoft Word, make sure your page margins are 1/2 inch or larger all the way around. Also, your font size for your section headers should be between 13 to 16 point. Your main body text font should be between 10 to 12 point. Don't use crazy fonts when typing up your resume. The recommended fonts are Arial, Calibre, Tahoma, and Times New Roman. Also, don't use a bunch of colors. Adding in a bunch of colors makes it look cartoonish and often unreadable. You want your resume to have a clean, professional appearance. Try to stick to just black and white, but if you're wanting to add color, make sure it's one that is easily legible. Make sure your resume is in a clear, easy to read layout. You'll want to use white space to draw attention to your main points and make your resume easier to read. Don't cram your text all together and form big blocks of words. It's not fun to read and everything blends together. On average, recruiters only spend about 6 seconds on their initial review of a resume. The bottom example would most likely end up in a recruiter's no pile because of how congested and hard to read it is. When creating your resume in programs like Microsoft Word, don't put any text in the header or footer sections of the document. A lot of applicant tracking systems can't read these sections and will rearrange your resume or even make it completely unreadable. It's better to be safe than sorry, so stay away from the headers and footers. Unless you are applying for a job as a TV news broadcaster, do not put your picture anywhere. The recruiter will be able to see your smiling face when you go interview with them. Review, review, review. Please review your resume for any spelling, grammar, or punctuation errors a few times before finalizing it. I try to use a buddy system when possible, which means I have a friend review it after I think it's good to go. A fresh pair of eyes reviewing it can often find hidden errors. Now let's talk about 2 general layouts of resumes. One for folks who don't have a lot of work experience and one for those who do. The amount of work experience you have determines how your resume will be laid out and the order of the information presented on it. If you're fresh out of school or just don't have that much work experience under your belt, you'll want to stick to a resume that is only 1 page in length and focuses on your skills. If you've been out of school for a while or you have quite a bit of work experience, you get to use up to 2 pages and will want to focus on your work history and the knowledge you've gained in the workforce. Because of the different areas to focus on, there are 2 sections that change their location on the resume. Basically, the education and the skills sections swap spots depending on if you have experience or not. All right, now that we covered the basic formatting of a resume, let's now review the different sections of it. All resumes, regardless of experience, start with a name and contact information section. At the very top is your name and contact information. For your name, you will need to put your first and last name. Putting your middle initial is optional, but you should add it if you have a very general common name, like Dave Smith. Next is your phone number. Preferably, you should use one that only you will be answering, like your cell phone. But if that's not possible, then list a number that hopefully only one other person will be answering. The last thing you want is a young child or crazy relative answering a recruiter's call. Also, make sure the number you list has a voicemail. One surefire way to make a recruiter skip you and move on to the next applicant is not having a voicemail for them to leave a message on if you don't answer. Next, you will list your email address. Hiring managers are starting to email rather than call people when scheduling interviews, so make sure that the email you list is one that you check often. Also, use an email that is professional, not one you created years ago. You might have thought that cray cray hot baby 09 was an amazing email way back in the day, but I can tell you it's not impressing hiring managers now. The last thing you need to include in your name and contact info section is your address. You only need to list your city, state, and zip code on your resume. You'll be listing your full address on your application that is going to accompany your resume, so there's no need to repeat the same information. You can rearrange the order of your contact information depending on what design you choose for your resume. Just make sure that your name is more noticeable than the rest of the information. Another thing to remember is to always update your phone number, email, and address information if it ever changes. You don't want to miss out on a job opportunity because the employer couldn't get a hold of you due to old information. Next is your resume summary or objective, depending on your level of experience. Think of this section as the action-packed thriller of your career. On both types of resumes, this section is right after your name and contact information. If you have a lot of work experience, then you will want to summarize your skills and qualifications that are related to the position you are applying for. For example, if I'm applying for an administrative assistant position, the hiring manager probably won't be impressed with my poodle nail trimming abilities from a dog grooming job I previously had. So make sure that you tie everything back to the job description. In this section, you can also mention any major accomplishments, like becoming certified in your career field. and express the value you and your special work skills could bring to the company if hired. Please update this section for each position you are applying for. Recruiters will skim this section to determine if they're going to continue reading, so make sure it contains information relevant to the position you are applying for. In the past, I had graded candidates lower or passed them altogether because they had a resume summary that was for a completely different career field. To me, it showed laziness and that the candidate didn't value working for a company enough to take the time to update it. If you are just joining the workforce, you will be writing a resume objective instead of a summary. An objective is almost the same thing, but there are a few differences. Instead of listing your past work accomplishments, you will instead want to mention your career goals and the relevant skills that you bring to the table. Start by mentioning your strongest character traits. For example, being highly organized and outgoing. Since you don't have much work experience to back you up, instead, discuss how your education will help you excel in your job. And again, express the value you would bring to the hiring manager's organization if given the chance. Just like a resume summary, your resume objective needs to be updated for each position you are applying for. For experienced resumes, the skills section is right after the summary. For individuals just joining the workforce, you're still probably building your skills, so this section will go later in your resume, usually after your work history. The skills section of a resume is like sprinkles on top of a cupcake. They aren't the main component, but definitely gives your resume some extra pizzazz to make it stand out. Regardless of whether you are experienced or new to the workforce, the concepts are the same, but the location of this info changes. When deciding what skills you want to include, make sure you look back at the job description that you're applying for and pick the skills you have that match it. Don't list irrelevant skills that don't tie back to the job description, and only list skills you actually have. When creating your resume, make sure to include both hard and soft skills. So what are hard and soft skills? Well, hard skills are usually technical in nature. They're things that you can easily learn. For example, computer skills like being proficient in Microsoft Word or other software programs is a hard skill. Being fluent in another language is another hard skill. Soft skills, on the other hand, are usually part of your personality and how you approach things. For example, how well you can stay organized, your ability to problem solve, and if you're able to handle a large amount of stress. Those are all considered soft skills. Both hard and soft skills are equally as important in the workforce. The work experience section of your resume is where you will list information on your previous jobs and or other experience you have had. This section is located in the middle of both types of resumes. If you are someone who has extensive work experience, you should usually only include no more than 10 to 15 years back of work history on your resume. Starting with your current or most recent job and working your way backwards, provide a detailed summary of the tasks you performed and your major accomplishments at each job. If you're finding that your work history is a little too large and is turning your resume into a 3-page or more paper monster, then just give detailed descriptions of your relevant positions and only briefly mention any other positions that aren't as relative to the position you are applying for. Things you want to make sure you include in this section is your job title, which should be up front and center so it's easily spotted, along with the month and year you were hired and left the company. If you're still working somewhere, just put the word current as your end date. You'll want to list the name and the city and state location of the company you work for. Next, summarize your key responsibilities. Don't just list all of the everyday tasks you had to perform. Instead, list the main responsibilities you held that show you possess the knowledge or skills that are highlighted in the job description you are applying for. Finally, list some of your major accomplishments or achievements that you had while in that position. Again, make sure they are relevant to the position you are applying for. Otherwise, they won't impress the hiring manager as much as you hoped. Folks lacking work experience will complete this section in the same way as the experienced folks, but with more focus on related experience versus work experience. You'll still want to list any work experience you have, but you can also include any relevant experience like school projects and volunteering. So you might be wondering, what is relevant experience? Don't worry, everyone has it. It's past experiences that are related to a job you're applying for and that provide you with the skills or knowledge needed for that job. For example, let's say you're applying for a customer service representative job. If you previously worked as a cashier at a grocery store, then you likely develop verbal communication and problem-solving skills. And relevant experience doesn't have to only come from having the same job title or working in the same industry as a position you are applying for. It can come from unrelated jobs, projects, and other sources, as long as those sources show you develop skills needed for the job you are applying for. When creating your resume, think of any previous jobs, internships, volunteer work, school projects, extracurricular activities, even tutoring that could have provided you with experience in one shape or another. Relevant experience can come from almost anywhere if you look hard enough. The education section of resumes is where you will briefly list your education background, meaning the schools you've attended. Unless you are newly joining the workforce, your education section will always go after your work experience section. When listing your education history, you will need to put your school's name, its city and state location, your graduation year, or the years you were attending if you didn't graduate, and your course of study. Only list your college information. The only time you should list your high school information is if you haven't received a degree yet from a college or technical school. If you have a professional certification that can be used in lieu or instead of formal education, then you can list it in your education section as well. If you're just out of school, your resume will rely heavily on your education, which is why it's moved to under your resume objective section. You will need to list your school's name, location, and your graduation year, but you will also want to include any coursework, clubs, and activities relevant to the position you are applying for. For example, if you're applying for a job at a grocery store, then you would want to list that you helped with the student-run snack shack at your high school. The last area on both types of resumes is the additional sections. The last section of an experienced person's resume is optional, but can help move you to the top of the application pile. You can include things like certifications and training that you went to that are relevant to the job you're applying for. You can also list any professional affiliations you have with other organizations or groups. These help to show you are active in your career field and can potentially bring additional resources to the company. Just like on the experience resume, the additional sections on a newly graduated resume are optional, but are encouraged. Some key items to list are any achievements or honors you received. For example, any scholarships or awards you received, or any advanced classes or academic competitions you participated in. You can also list any clubs, groups, or interests outside of school that you may have. Try to keep the things you list relevant to the position you are applying for. So you are finally done creating your resume. Now it's time for your cover letter. So a cover letter is like the cherry on top of an ice cream sundae. Not the main thing keeping it all together, but definitely needed to make the dish complete. Cover letters are short and concise, usually only 3 paragraphs long, and are readable in about 10 seconds or less. Their main purpose is to highlight what makes you the perfect fit for the job, but they are also useful to explain employment gaps, changing careers, or changing locations. The first thing you want to do, even before writing your cover letter, is to do some research. Nothing crazy, but just enough to customize your cover letter and maybe even impress them during an interview. You'll want to look up the company that you're applying to. What do they do? Do they sell things or provide a service? Who are their customers? What is their mission, vision, and values? What about the company makes you want to work for them? Next, research the specific position you are applying for. What can you bring to this role that others can't? Review the job description to find keywords that you can tie into your cover letter. After doing research, you are ready to write your cover letter. Part 1 is your contact info, date, and greeting. You'll want to list the same contact info from your resume on your cover letter. After your contact info, skip a few lines down and put the date you are sending your letter in. This date will need to be updated each time. Skip a few more lines down and put your greeting to the person receiving your cover letter. If the hiring manager's or recruiter's name is listed on the job posting, address your letter to that person. For example, Dear Mr. Smith or Dear Susan Taylor. If there is no contact listed, put Dear Hiring Manager. Your opening paragraph is your attention getter. This is where you introduce yourself. You will want to mention the specific job you are applying for. So yes, this means that your cover letter will need to be updated for each job and company you apply for. Then explain why you're applying for that particular job and why you're excited to hopefully work for that company. Talk about how that job lines up with your career goals. Make sure to sound excited, but not over the top. The middle paragraph is your meat and potatoes of the letter. Here's where you would put information about your most relevant experience, the skills and qualifications that make you the perfect candidate. Connect those skills to previous accomplishments. You should avoid repeating the same stuff that's on your resume, though. Instead, expand on your resume's main points and provide more detail on those accomplishments. Make sure to use keywords in your cover letter. This is extremely important because recruiters will sometimes skim or run a search and only pull resumes by keywords, experience, or training. The last or closing paragraph is where you can clarify major gaps in your employment history or explain why you're changing your career direction. When I was a recruiter, we received applications from all over the world, regardless of the job's location. If you're planning on moving away from your current home location and are applying for jobs prior to your move, sometimes it's useful to mention your relocation plans in your cover letter so that the hiring manager is aware of why you're applying so far away from home. Your final paragraph is also to recap the reasons for you applying and why you think you'd be a great fit. Finally, you should thank the person reading your letter. A simple "thank you in advance for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you soon" goes a long way. Finish your cover letter with a formal closing like "sincerely" or "all the best" or "regards," and sign your name under it. That's it. Your cover letter is done. All right, that was the end of my presentation. We will now open it up to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kimberly.
No problem.
That was very informative. So thank you. That's very good. So I'm looking, and we didn't have any questions come in on Facebook. I know there's a bunch of people watching with us. And the great thing about this is that people can view it afterwards if you don't have the time right now to watch the whole thing, or if this gave you ideas, you can go back and pause where you need to and listen about each section. So yeah, I guess, so I had a couple questions. Let me just double check if anyone else. So generally, even if someone doesn't have work experience, like when's a good time maybe to put together maybe like your first resume, or when to put together a resume?
I mean, I'd say that it's never too early to start putting one together. When you're putting together a resume at first, you might think, oh, this will be something easy. I'm just listing what I've already done. But it actually is kind of intimidating, especially when it's your first one. There's a lot of resources online that offer a great amount of information on how to, or phrases to use, things like that. So it does take some time. So I'd say it's also easier if you start your resume and then add on to it instead of trying to create it all at once. So I'd say kind of the sooner the better. I mean, if you're just coming out of high school, it's still good to just list things because you'll also forget them in the meantime after that. Rhonda, Des, anything else to add?
No, I agree. It's never too early. I mean, I know I've helped my kids do them when they were in high school, and just starting out with simple things of volunteering, say for churches or babysitting, sports of, activities that they do. Those things are just as important at their age to put on a resume. And I agree, update it all the time. I say you're behind, you are behind if you're working and you don't have your resume updated. It should always be updated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think for anybody that's in high school or even in college, if you haven't put together a resume, I would definitely recommend just doing your initial resume, and then in high school or even in college, any type of awards or anything that you do, you can just kind of keep in a folder, whether it's electronically or on paper. And then that way you can always go back and update. But I think it's a really great idea for students and anybody for that matter to at least try and go in and update their resume annually, and again, just keep a folder so you know any type of certification that you've received or training that you've taken that may be applicable depending on the type of job that you're applying for.
That makes sense. It sounds it's more like it's a living document instead of, doing it once and you're done, or, or when you're maybe between jobs and you're looking for one. I know in the past I've used, like whenever I had an updated job description, those have really good keywords in there. And sometimes you'll forget, if you've been somewhere for a little while, all the different responsibilities you have had along the way. I just blanked on my next question. What about, do you guys have any other questions for each other about the resumes or cover letters?
I have a question because I was helping a high school group of students, and a lot of them had listed their GPA, and I just thought it was kind of interesting. I recommended that, I guess, if you have a really high GPA, maybe it would be advantageous, but I guess, Rhonda, Kimberly, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, only if you have a high GPA. I've actually noticed that recently they have assessment tests that you can take online through Indeed, and they will attach to your resume as well. And it tells if you're an expert, if you're efficient, if you're proficient. And it also says if you just completed it, means you did not do very well. So I would not add that to your resume, but the ones that the assessments that you do very well in, you should attach those as well, because it talks about communication, problem solving, IT, just all kinds of different things that you can take tests on. So that could be really helpful for someone that's new and doesn't have a lot of work experience.
I agree. And all of that, like the tests that you were talking about from Indeed, a lot of those skills can be listed actually in the skills section. And then, for example, if you do have a higher GPA that you want to list, or you were in any like AP classes, honor classes, then that would be good to kind of notate that in the accomplishments section towards the bottom, where you're still showing that, hey, look, this is one of my achievements that I got.
I guess this is a general question. A lot of places are going, it seems like paperless. Like when I got out of high school, it was, you got your resume, like we did our resume in a business class or something as an assignment, and you printed it out and you maybe had it on a thumb drive. But now with, either COVID or also trying to go paperless, it seems like that's more of an acceptable way, is to electronically also send it. Would you guys, have you seen that? I guess.
Yes, there's a lot of companies nowadays are going online and are usually trying to only accept online applications and resumes. So with that being said, yeah, you definitely want to make sure, like it was said in the webinar, not to use your headers or footers, because that will sometimes mess up your resume when it's uploaded into the applicant tracking system. But yeah, I've definitely seen the last, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years that I have yet to come across a company that says mail your application or your resume in via, USPS. A lot of them are going towards the complete it online and submit it that way.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. And for anyone who is watching, we do have a shareholder resource computer. It's just about up and running. We had to get a different one here in the Anchorage office. And we can print things for you also here at the Anchorage office. I know this office in Antioch, if you're in a place that maybe doesn't have great internet connections, I think we'll still accept, I don't know, Des will still, will jump in and correct me, but, I know a lot of our communities, it's, the fax is a good way, but just to maybe know where your local resources are that you can print things. can sometimes be a hurdle for people that I've helped. So library is usually a good place too, if you do have a library in your community. So currently in Anchorage, I think that one's not as good. But if you're in Anchorage, you can always call ahead here, and we can try to print things for you here as well. So are there
Hey,
anything else?
Sarah, one thing I wanted to mention is about references. It's not something that needs to be included on your resume, but I think it's important to already have references set up. So, you know, reach out to people, ask them if you can use them as a reference because you're going to be looking for a job. That way, if someone calls you for an interview, sometimes they want to see your references before, sometimes after. You just want to have them ready to go.
That brings up a good point. So when you are talking about references, I know sometimes I used to put it on the bottom of a resume, like the person's name and their title, the company and their phone number. So if it's not on there, would it be more acceptable to get like a reference letter from those people, or just to have their contact information handy in case they do ask for your references?
Most
Either
applications,
is fine. Oops, sorry, Kimberly.
most applications will ask for it when you're going through initially. And Rhonda had a great point with actually collecting all the information beforehand, because there have been times that I've just seen other companies' applications and it won't let you actually submit your resume or your application resume until you complete the references section. So you do all of that work and then it just kind of sits in limbo. So you definitely want to have that information. And you don't want to list on your resume, but definitely almost every application I've ever seen has a section where you list it on there.
Okay. Rhonda, anything to add?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, just with regards to references, as Rhonda mentioned, I would definitely encourage, let's say maybe it's been a couple months since you are looking for a new job and you had your references set up. It's good to just go ahead and either, text or call your reference and just, let them know, hey, I'm, looking for another job. I was laid off, or whatever your situation is. So then they have an awareness. So then you're not called out of the blue. That's happened to me, and be like, oh yeah, and then I'm like texting, like, hey, I got a call. So it's just good to let them know ahead of time. And then that way they're prepared, should they get a call from someone checking on a reference.
And for references also, like if somebody is just like graduating high school or college and doesn't have that much work experience, they can also use references, for example, an elder in their community that they've helped helped out and help with, or say their basketball coach or a teacher, or even somebody at the tribal council. They can use all of those different resources as somebody that can give a good reference for them. So it doesn't have to be just work related or just, personal friends and whatnot. You definitely want to have somebody who is a little bit of distance from you, like, for example, a basketball coach or teacher, and not everyone being your relative kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I believe, so we didn't have any other questions coming in. So I want to say thank you to all of you, Rhonda and Des and Kimberly. I think that was a very good presentation. Thank you. So again, this is part of our TKC Lunch and Learn series. Today we're going over the resumes and cover letters, and watch for an announcement of our next one. And feel free to use this, and it'll be posted on our Facebook here soon. And hi, Katie. Thank you, Katie Duran. And feel free to go back and use this and rewatch it and pause it into sections. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Message us on our Facebook and ask if we know of anyone that can help you, or if you need an extra pair of eyes looking over your resume and cover letter. Just feel free to do that. So thank you again. And I look forward to our next Lunch and Learn series. I believe we'll have one in November, maybe going over financial literacy or something. So thank you very much, you guys, and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.